from Kim Jong-un to the United States.
Their missile testing, this is something that is driven by their overwhelming security concern.
Delaying the military drills.
That the North Koreans may make that demand, and it will put pressure on Moon.
But we're talking about nuclear war. No U.S. president can afford to take this kind of a threat for granted.
From the Voice of America, this is Washington Talk.
Hello and welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun-jung Cho. Happy New Year to everybody. We begin 2018 with improvements in inter-Korean relations. The two Koreas agreed to hold high-level talks for the first time in 2 years. But while North Korea extended an olive branch to the south, it's still threatened it can attack all of the U.S. with a nuclear weapon.
우리는 대표단 파견을 포함하여 필요한 조치를 취할 용의가 있으며 미국 본토 전역이 우리의 핵 타격 사정권 안에 있으며
취할 것을
Now joining me today, Mr. Frank Januzzi, president of the Mansfield Foundation. He also served as an advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Also my guest today, Mr. Scott Snyder, director of U.S.-Korea Policy Program at the Council on Foreign Relations. He worked as an Asia specialist in many think tanks for more than 20 years. He also recently published a new book, South Korea at the Crossroads. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
Welcome. Scott, let me begin with you. South and North Korea agreed to hold high-level talks for the first time in 2 years, and this was something that President Moon had been requesting ever since he took office. But why is North Korea making a sudden overture now?
It's very hard to know exactly what the motives of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are, but I think that one of them probably is that he can also gain a benefit by participating in the Olympics with North Korean athletes, because whatever accomplishments the North Koreans have will also give him an opportunity to celebrate. At the same time, I do believe that he is testing President Moon and he is testing the U.S.-Korea alliance, and I think that we will see some requests or positions on the North Korean side that are intended to try to determine the extent to which the U.S. and South Korea are on the same page.
Frank, why is North Korea making an overture now?
Well, in addition to the reasons that Scott already laid out, I would say that he's probably looking for some economic benefit downstream. The two countries that are most important for North Korea's economic future are China and South Korea. And with sanctions coming from the South and economic pressure also imposed by China in response to UN sanctions, Kim Jong-un may be looking to lighten the atmosphere, improve the overall mood on the peninsula, and perhaps seek some easing in the economic pressure that is, I think, beginning to have an impact on their economy.
The agenda for the talks include not only the Olympics, but also seeking ways to improve inter-Korean relations. So, Scott, do you expect to see some meaningful rapprochement this time around?
I think that most of the opportunity is really near-term in terms of the atmosphere surrounding the Olympics. Although there's something very interesting that Kim Jong-un has done in his New Year's speech, and that is that he has said that he wants to improve the atmosphere on the Korean Peninsula, not only for the Olympics, but also for the 70th anniversary of the founding of the DPRK, which of course is September 9th. And so what that means is that he's going to want to try to extend some of the reduced tensions to the fall. And I think it raises some very interesting questions related to whether or not North Korea will make some demands with regard to further delay of U.S. ROK military exercises beyond what has already been announced with the delay to April.
It's a key point. The U.S. normally holds large field exercises in the springtime and also a tabletop exercise later in the year. Both of those exercises are going to be adjusted in their schedule this year as a result of the Olympics. but the full extent of them, the scale of them, and the precise timing of them, I think, remains to be determined. And I think Kim Jong-un has long, and the North Koreans have long had as one of their objectives, toning down or preferably eliminating such large-scale U.S. ROK joint exercises. What's not clear is whether they will be willing to reciprocate and put similar limits on their own exercises or on missile tests or nuclear tests.
Scott, delaying the military drills further beyond the Olympics, if President Moon makes such a concession, wouldn't that create a rift between Seoul and Washington?
I believe that it's entirely likely that the North Koreans may make that demand, and it will put pressure on Moon. I believe that there will be consultations between the U.S. and South Korea, and I think that it's likely that the U.S. and South Korea together would resist demands for further delay on that front.
Frank, we're on this peaceful momentum on the Korean Peninsula, and Secretary Tillerson and others had said that preconditions for talks with North Korea is contingent upon how North Korea would stop its missile testing for a while. And this Olympics cool down, would this lead to talks between Seoul, Washington, and Pyongyang?
That's a great question, Yoon Jung. I mean, basically, the North Koreans view the United States as their principal security threat. And the talks they're having, hopefully next week, with South Korea are not likely to make North Korea feel much more secure. Ultimately, they need to sit down with the United States. As the U.S. approaches the prospect of dialogue with North Korea, the U.S. is going to be examining what they need to get in the short term from Pyongyang in terms of concessions on missile testing, nuclear testing, or other provocative moves that are sanctioned by the UN Security Council. I think that right now we cannot be confident that the U.S.-North Korea talks will necessarily get started just because there's this thaw in South-North Korea talks.
I think that's right, but you know, Washington, I'm sure, will be watching the inter-Korean talks very closely. And so this provides an opportunity for the U.S. to evaluate what North Korea is doing, and in a way, North Korea has an opportunity to prove some of the skeptics about the prospects for a U.S.-North Korean negotiation wrong if they can handle themselves well in inter-Korean talks.
Right, and Kim Jong-un sent a very bellicose message to the United States in his New Year's message, and he is sending different signals to South Korea and the United States at the same time. So what is his game plan?
Well, I think that it's precisely that message, one of kind of defiance against where the U.S. wants to go, and then the olive branch to South Korea, that has led many people to say, oh, the North Koreans' game plan really is to divide the United States and South Korea. So, you know, we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But clearly, with regard to the United States, the North Koreans are very much focused on trying to make sure that they have a level playing field from their perspective on the nuclear front.
I think North Korea may well have that objective of driving a wedge, but I really think it's only Seoul and Washington that have the risk of drifting apart. I don't think that the North Koreans have that power, really. And I think that as long as the U.S. continues to consult closely with Seoul, I'm not worried that North-South talks are going to somehow imperil the U.S.-ROK alliance. I do think that it's going to be critical to see how Washington responds to the initial offerings of dialogue with the South. And I hope that Washington won't let this window that seems to be opening pass by without trying to see and explore what's possible.
Scott, is this a good chance that Washington should also grab the opening?
Well, so far, I don't think that we see an opening from Kim Jong-un to the United States. But what we could see is moderated behavior by North Korea during the inter-Korean talks, including a cessation of missile testing in order to help contribute to this peaceful atmosphere.
I'm afraid that might be wishful thinking, though, Scott, because, you know, if you look at North Korea, their missile testing, even static tests of the rocket engines, this is something that is driven by their overwhelming security concern and their desire to perfect their ICBM deterrent capability. And I'm not sure that we should expect them to halt that even in the midst of North-South talks.
There is an opportunity for North Korea
Indeed.
to show some self-restraint.
Yes.
Whether or not North Korea is willing to take advantage of that opportunity, frankly, I'm skeptical as well, primarily because everything about what Kim Jong-un has been doing over the course of the past 2 or 3 years has been really centered on his own sense of extreme vulnerability. And I don't think that that is going to go away because we have a chance to hold an Olympic Games on the Korean Peninsula.
We're in this period when North Korea is approaching to South Korea while, being very hard on the United States. What do you think is the position that South Korea should take at this time, Scott?
Well, I think South Korea, President Moon has to grasp this potential opening, even if it's just a short-term opening to try to stabilize the environment around the Olympics. And then, of course, he's going to try to extend this period of reduced tension. And I think the right way to do that is actually by phasing the talks, talk about the Olympics, and then indicate to North Korea that additional issues can continue to be discussed after the period of the Olympics.
Frank?
Yes, with a U.S. president who's distracted at home, I think this is an opportunity for Moon Jae-in to take the lead on the Korean Peninsula and then see if President Trump can join him with any opportunities that his initiative and dialogue create.
But there are still skeptics in Washington, D.C. I mean, President Trump only mildly welcomed the inter-Korean talks, saying that talks are a good thing. And then the spokesperson for State Department said that she's skeptical that Kim Jong-un is sincere. So what is the general view of this ongoing reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, the view from Washington, Scott?
Well, I think that the atmosphere is one of skepticism, and the job of the talks is to prove that they can make progress. There's an opportunity now that actually Kim Jong-un has created for South Korea. It's an important opportunity. The United States is not going to stand in the way of it. And we need, we will take near-term tension reduction, and then let's see if it can be lasting or not.
We'll have to wrap our first discussion here and move on to our second topic.
With fire and fury.
핵 단추가 내 사무실 책상 위에 항상 놓여 있다는 것, 이는 결코 위협이 아닌 현실임을 똑바로 알아야 합니다.
President Trump made it clear America will not be bullied, America will not be threatened.
They will be met with fire and fury.
남도 주변에 대한 포위 사격을 단행하기 위한
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
지할 소리만 하는 넉다리에게는
Nuclear button made headlines this week as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he has a nuclear button, and President Trump tweeted his nuclear button is much bigger and powerful. The two leaders have engaged in an escalating war of words since last year. Now, Frank, let me give my first question to you. What is Kim Jong-un's message to the United States when he says that he has a nuclear button on his table? Is he saying that he's going to deploy weapons soon?
Well, I think he's going a little beyond that. He's alleging that he has perfected a nuclear deterrent capability. I think most experts in Washington are skeptical that the North has completed that task. But we also know that North Korea has gone far enough in the development of nuclear weapons and delivery systems that no U.S. president can afford to take this kind of a threat for granted. I think talk about nuclear buttons, though, whether in Pyongyang or in Washington, remind me of an old expression that people use in Texas, where they criticize big talkers as all hat and no cattle. I think we really should avoid this kind of bluster, and I would hope that both Kim Jong-un and President Trump would cool their rhetoric. We're talking about nuclear war. It's not a joking matter or one to be bantered about on Twitter accounts.
Scott, President Trump that said his button is more powerful and more bigger, and then his button actually works. So what has been the reaction from the legislators and from the political circle on his tweet on this?
Well, frankly, I think we've seen discomfort during this year from Capitol Hill with regard to the possibility that a single person, president, could make a decision of that magnitude without really having to consult much with anybody. And so I think it's very interesting to see a revisiting of this issue in Congress, whether or not Congress is willing to take action in order to change or constrain the president in any particular way, I think remains to be seen. But we can feel the discomfort, especially with a president who is making these kinds of statements much too lightly for many people's taste.
There are supporters who say that his tweets are a show of strength, part of coercive diplomacy. So what are some of the pros of President Trump's tweets on North Korea?
Well, President Trump really, I think, as part of his own style in business and now in politics, has really emphasized uncertainty maximization. And what that does is it gives him the widest scope possible to make decisions. So he doesn't ever box himself in. And so I think this uncertainty maximization approach, in the initial stages, I think it even had effect on North Korea. But the problem is that the rhetoric also can pin you in. And where that becomes a problem is that the North Koreans, when they hear the president speak, they don't really think that the leader's words are reversible. So if President Trump says something really dramatic, like he's going to destroy their country, they have a hard time digesting the idea that a presidential statement can be taken so lightly or can be reversed so quickly.
On the plus side, that he's created a sense of urgency. And I think that's actually good for diplomacy on the peninsula. On the downside, this uncertainty maximization that Scott speaks about, it's not a position you really want to put your allies in. You want your allies to have confidence in your direction, in your reliability, and your sobriety. We are used to fiery rhetoric out of Pyongyang. We're much less used to it coming from Washington. So I think part of the harsh response to President Trump's rhetoric is that we are unfamiliar with U.S. presidents using this kind of language.
Yeah, the real problem with the president's tweets is that he hasn't found the DM or direct message function on his Twitter account.
We'll end this conversation here and move on to our next segment. Now, time for the photo moment, a time to look at an interesting North Korea picture. The photo today is North Korean leader Kim Jong-un delivering his New Year's speech. Mr. Kim wore a silver gray suit and a matching tie. This is the second year in a row that he wore a Western suit instead of the Mao-style jacket and got rid of the badge that has his father and grandfather's face on it. At the beginning of his speech, Mr. Kim also bowed deeply. Frank, what is your reaction to this picture?
Well, when Chinese leaders like Deng Xiaoping ditched the Mao suit and began wearing Western suits, it was a sign of more than just the end of the Cultural Revolution. It was a sign of, in the case of China, 改革开放, reform and opening up. And I think we should not discount the symbolism of the leader of North Korea donning this Armani-style suit for his New Year's address. I think he wants to convey modernity, openness to the world, and even a little bit of a Western sensibility. So I think it's a fascinating development, and he's signaling something to his own people.
Those are great points by Frank. And I guess what I would add is that he's coming into his own. It's notable in his speech that he referred to his father and grandfather on fewer occasions this year than in the past. And so I think that this is Kim Jong-un trying to also signal that he is his own man and that he is in charge.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Scott, Frank, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this was Washington Talk from VOA, and I'm Eun Jung Cho. Thank you for watching.